Man, let me tell you something. The world ain't ready for what just happened. You see, for the longest time, people thought there were only a few countries running the show, pulling the strings, deciding who eats and who starves, who grows and who stays behind. But then India walked up to the stage, not quietly, not humbly, not asking permission, but boldly with fire in its chest, and made a move so powerful, so unshakable that the United States itself had to sit down and swallow its pride. That right there, that was humiliation, and not just a little embarrassment. It was the kind of humiliation that makes the so-called king realize the throne ain't safe anymore. Now people are scratching their heads wondering, how did this even happen? Because for decades the narrative was the same. America was the sheriff of the global town. They told other countries how to behave, where to trade, what to build, and what to dismantle. And if you dared to resist, they'd slap you with sanctions, isolate you, or roll up with their military might just to remind you who's boss. But India wasn't having it. India had been patient. It had been listening, learning, watching, waiting for its moment. And when the time came, it made one move so bold, so unapologetic that it flipped the game upside down. This wasn't some accident. This wasn't luck. This was years of strategy, years of determination, years of saying, we're not just going to survive, we're going to thrive. And here's the truth people don't want to talk about. America thought India would forever remain a follower. They thought India would keep playing second fiddle, always looking up for approval, always waiting for handouts. But India looked at that old script and tore it to shreds. They said, no, we're not going to walk behind you. We're not going to beg for your permission. We're writing our own rules now. And when India did that, the United States realized for the first how India surprised the US time in a long time. They weren't in control of the narrative anymore. You see, the bold move wasn't just about power, it was about pride. It was about saying, we're not scared of your sanctions. We're not scared of your lectures. And we sure as hell ain't scared of your threats. Because America has built its empire not just on wealth, not just on military, but on fear. Fear of being cut off, fear of being punished, fear of being left out. And here comes India saying, try it, cut us off, punish us. We'll still rise. And that shook the whole system. And here's what makes this so poetic. America underestimated India. They looked at India and saw poverty, population, chaos, noise. They thought there's no way this country could stand against us. But what they forgot was that India has something no empire can crush: resilience. India has been invaded, colonized, divided, looted. And yet, every single time it stood back up. And not only did it stand back up, it stood stronger. You can't shame a nation that's been through centuries of humiliation and still kept its spirit. You can't break a people that learned how to turn struggle into strength. So when India made that bold move, it wasn't just about the present. It was the roar of history. It was centuries of pain, centuries of struggle, centuries of being told, you can't, finally answering back, watch us. And that roar was so loud, the United States had to cover its ears. Now let's talk about humiliation. America doesn't like to be challenged, doesn't like to be told no. It's used to countries bending, bowing, apologizing. But India didn't bow. India didn't apologize. India stood tall and said, we'll do what's best for us and you'll just have to deal with it. That right, there is humiliation for a superpower. Because power isn't just about weapons or money, it's about control. And when you lose control, even over one country, the illusion of your dominance starts to crumble. That's what happened here. America realized the world was watching and the world was saying, if India can stand up, maybe we can too. You see, humiliation spreads faster than respect. Respect you got to earn. Humiliation, one bold moment, one fearless decision, and suddenly the mask slips off the giant. Suddenly everybody sees they're not untouchable. India showed the world that the emperor ain't wearing clothes, And now people are whispering, if India can do it, why not us? That's the real humiliation, the ripple effect. And let me tell you something else. America prides itself on being the leader of democracy, the moral compass, the example. But when India stood up, it did power shift in global politics, so not by copying America's script, but by following its own path. India didn't need to prove its democracy by looking like the West. India didn't need to prove its strength by starting wars. India's move was bold because it was independent. It was rooted in its own interests, its own people, its own culture. That's what hurt America the most. It couldn't be spun as an act of dependence. It couldn't be twisted into a narrative if we allowed it. No, this was India saying, we did it because we chose to. That's a slap in the face of every superpower that thought they held the leash. Now, I want you to picture the boardroom in Washington, leaders sitting around, staring at each other, asking, how did we let this happen? They're used to playing chess, moving pawns around. But suddenly India flipped the board. That room wasn't filled with confidence. It was filled with panic because humiliation is not just about losing. It's about losing in front of everybody. The whole world saw it. Allies saw it. Rivals saw it. The people America thought it could lecture saw it. And once you're humiliated on the global stage, it's almost impossible to hide the bruise. And make no mistake, India's bold move wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because once you've tasted freedom, once you've tasted the power of saying no, you don't go back. India unlocked something that cannot be reversed. And now every single time America tries to pull its old tricks, India will remind them, you tried before and you failed. You tried to corner us and we stood taller. You tried to shame us and we came out stronger. That kind of confidence is deadly for a superpower that relies on intimidation. The world is shifting and the United States knows it. It's like being at the top of the hill and suddenly hearing footsteps getting louder behind you. You turn around expecting some small challenger, but instead you see India one. 4 billion strong, armed with technology, economy, culture, and pride. That's not just competition. That's destiny catching up. So why was this move bold? Because it wasn't just about India. It was about every country that's been told they're not enough. It was about every nation that's been treated like a follower. It was about breaking the lessons in courage and strategy chains of approval, seeking and standing tall in the face of giants. India humiliated the United States by reminding the world that giants can be challenged, that fear can be broken, and that respect comes to those who seize it, not those who wait for it. And the best part, India did it with its own flavor, its own style, its own power. Not by copying, not by mimicking, but by being authentically itself. That's what makes humiliation sting even more. It wasn't beaten at its own game. It was beaten at a game it didn't even know how to play. America couldn't stop it, couldn't predict it, couldn't control it. And now they're left dealing with the fallout. This is the beginning of a new era. The world has seen the cracks. The illusion of invincibility has been shattered. India has humiliated the United States not by destroying it, but by exposing it, and exposure is worse than defeat, because once the truth is out, there's no going back. The US realized that India is no longer a follower. It is now a force rewriting global rules, and that right there is the part nobody saw coming. The part that cut deepest. The part that made Washington stare across the ocean and whisper, "What just happened?" For decades, the playbook was the same. The United States led, the rest followed. The US set the standard, and others either copied it or risked being left behind. But then India decided, we're not going to be a shadow anymore. We're not going to clap for someone else's script. We're not going to be a student in a class where we already know the answers. And the moment India started playing its own game, the balance of power tilted. Because let's be honest, America has built its dominance on perception as much as on reality. It's about the image of being in charge, the aura of being the country everybody looks to. They don't just want to be powerful. They want to be admired, feared, and obeyed. That's why humiliation hurts them so much. And India's boldness wasn't just an act of independence. It was a message to the world that you don't need to copy anyone to succeed. You don't need to play the role of follower just because someone tells you that's the only way forward. What India showed was courage, the kind that makes giants nervous. Because America has gotten used to countries being predictable, lining up for approval, waiting for aid, waiting for deals, waiting for validation. India broke that cycle. It said, we don't need validation from across the ocean. We don't need a stamp of approval. We've got our own stamp. That was when the US realized they weren't just dealing with a rising economy or a growing military. They were dealing with a mindset shift. And when the mindset of a nation shifts, no superpower on earth can stop it. India is no longer just reacting to what others do. It is creating the conditions, setting the stage, making the rules. Think about that. For a long time, India was part of the system built by others. Now it's building systems of why America was humiliated its own. Whether it's in technology, trade, defense, or diplomacy, India isn't waiting for someone to hand it a chair at the table. It's building a whole new table, and the world is starting to sit at it. That's the kind of transformation that leaves Washington fuming, because it's not just about one decision. It's about the future being rewritten without America holding the pen. And when you're used to holding the pen, when you're used to being the author of the world's story, and suddenly someone else starts writing, you don't just feel threatened, you feel exposed, because the truth is America's dominance has always relied on others believing they needed direction. India shattered that belief. India proved that a nation could chart its own course and not only survive but thrive. That's a dangerous example for a superpower that wants to keep everyone in line. What makes this even more humiliating for the United States is the scale of India's influence. We're talking about 1.4 billion people, an economy roaring forward, a military that's not just defensive, but increasingly assertive, and a diaspora shaping the world's biggest corporations. When a nation of that size, that talent, that ambition decides it's not going to follow anymore, you don't just lose a partner, you lose the illusion of control over the future. And that illusion, once broken, can't be glued back together. America realized India was rewriting the rules when its old tactics stopped working. Pressure didn't work. Threats fell flat. Sanctions, India found other ways. Lectures ignored. They threw everything in their toolbox at India, and India just brushed it off like dust on its shoulder. That's when Washington had to sit back and admit, this isn't the India we thought we could manage. This isn't the follower we used to know. This is something new. That's humiliation, because it forces a power to admit its old dominance doesn't fit the new world. India is showing that the world doesn't have to move in one direction anymore. That's the essence of rewriting the rules. It's not just about saying no. It's about saying, here's another way. India is making trade deals on its own. India's rise as a world leader terms, forming partnerships that aren't one-sided and building technology that doesn't depend on being spoon-fed. And every time it does this, it chips away at the old system America built. A system where everything ran through Washington first. Now countries are watching India and thinking if they can carve their own path, so can we. And you want to know why this terrifies the youth more than anything? Because India isn't anti-American. India isn't trying to destroy America. India is simply proving that you don't need America to rise, and that right there is worse than an enemy. It's a rival success story because an enemy you can fight, but a rival you can't stop without admitting weakness. That's what the US is wrestling with now. How do you deal with a country that refuses to play second fiddle, but isn't interested in playing the villain either? How do you handle a nation that isn't afraid of you, but also isn't dependent on you? That's a new kind of problem, one America never prepared for. Let's talk about influence. For years, America measured its power by how many countries lined up behind it. But now the lineup is looking shaky. Nations are seeing India stand tall, making bold moves, and they're thinking twice about blindly following Washington. Because leadership is no longer about who shouts the loudest. It's about who inspires the most confidence. And India, with its resilience, with its independence, with its ability to balance East and West, is inspiring in ways America can't anymore. Rewriting the rules means no longer playing the old game where power flows from one center. Instead, India is showing that power can be shared, that partnerships can be equal, that respect doesn't have to be begged for. It can be earned through strength, dignity, and persistence. That's why the US feels what you can learn from India's bold move, humiliated. They spent decades convincing the world that their way was the only way. And now here comes India proving otherwise. That revelation shakes the foundation of everything America stands on. And don't underestimate the symbolic weight of this, because humiliation isn't always about losing a battle. It's about losing the narrative. America loves to be the storyteller. But now India is telling its own story and people are listening. The narrative is no longer America leads, others follow. It's becoming nations rise and the world adapts. That shift in storytelling is more powerful than bombs, more powerful than sanctions, because it changes how people see themselves. The US realized that India's role isn't just about being another big economy. It's about being a model for a new kind of power, a power that doesn't need validation, a power that doesn't need to mimic, a power that doesn't need to be feared to be respected. That's the kind of power that rewrites the rules of the game. And when America saw that, it was like looking into a mirror and realizing the reflection is no longer theirs to control. India is not asking for a seat at the global table. It's building its own table. That means trade routes that don't run through Washington. That means alliances that don't require your approval. That means technological ecosystems that don't need Silicon Valley to survive. That means narratives that don't have to be told in English to matter. Every one of these steps is another reminder to the US that the era of unilateral dominance is fading. The humiliation comes from knowing the shift isn't temporary. This isn't a protest. This isn't a rebellion. This isn't a moment of defiance. This is the beginning of a permanent change. India has crossed a line where it can't go back to being a follower, because once you've proven you can lead, once you've proven you can stand on your own, there's no returning to the shadows. The US knows this. They know the world has seen India's courage. They know the mask has slipped. And they know no amount of pressure, no amount of intimidation, no amount of sweet talk can erase the fact that India is now rewriting the rules of the game they thought they